Hello and welcome, I'm Jaime Ocon, and here's what happened this week. In a first for Taiwan, prosecutors are charging a Chinese ship captain with deliberately damaging one of the country's undersea cables. Reese Ayers brings us more in Taipei.
Prosecutors in southern Taiwan are charging a Chinese ship captain for intentionally cutting one of the country's undersea cables. It's the first time that someone has ever been indicted on such charges in Taiwan. Taiwan has several submarine cables connecting its main island to its outlying territories. In late February, authorities spotted the ship containing 8 Chinese crew members loitering around waters off Taiwan's southwestern coast near the Taiwan Penghu No. 3 cable days before it was cut. The vessel, named Hongtai 58, is suspected of hooking the cable with its anchor and yanking it until it broke. Only the ship's captain has been brought up on charges. The 7 other crew members will not be charged due to a lack of evidence and will be sent back to China. This case is one of at least 2 cable cutting incidents this year involving ships linked to China. China, which claims Taiwan as its territory, has been ramping up threats around the country. Beijing has conducted naval exercises around Taiwan, and cable cutting is now believed to be one of its grey zone warfare tactics, where it exerts pressure on Taiwan without actually attacking. And just a few weeks ago, China revealed it had developed a new remote device capable of cutting cables, even in the world's deepest oceans. And with an upcoming project to link Taiwan, South Korea, Japan and the United States with an undersea cable, it's likely not just Taiwan who are concerned with China's undersea sabotage. Scott Huang, Devon Tai and Reese Ayers for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan and the United States have held a first round of tariff talks. That's according to Taiwan's cabinet. Taiwan is hoping to avoid a potential 32% tariff on its goods by the Trump administration. The two sides discussed other economic and trade issues in a video call. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te previously said he received a positive response from Washington on his plan to boost procurement and investment in the United States. After a week of market fluctuations, let's get more on where the global order now stands on trade. Our reporter Alec McDonald spoke to Jade Chang from the National University of Singapore.
With the U.S. opening a trade war that has been underpinned by uncertain policy, how have geopolitical partnerships shifted in Asia?
What's actually really interesting is with the tariffs, the alliance and formerly the alliances and the other kinds of relationships have not changed. They've not technically changed. There's been no abrogation of treaties. There's been no amendment of treaties. But what has happened is that there's a lot more apprehension about U.S. commitment. There's a lot less clarity over the direction in which the U.S. is heading, especially in terms of cooperation. People might bring up the issue of Ukraine, but Ukraine is not a U.S. treaty ally.
In this incident, then what case can Taipei benefit from this new trade environment?
So what's interesting is because Taiwan had actually benefited from the last sort of shock to trade during the first Trump administration, where economic ties with the PRC, between the US and the PRC, were tightened. So there was this acceleration of a China plus one strategy. Many Taiwanese firms relocated back to Taiwan, or Taiwanese firms moved from the PRC elsewhere. And because Taiwan was seen as part of that safer supply chain, it gained. I guess that is something that Taiwan can still bank on, although the certainty of that approach certainly is called into question by the Trump administration's more perhaps cavalier attitude towards longstanding relationships. That having been said, Taiwan is a major producer of semiconductors. It is important for U.S. security interests. U.S. have not stepped away from them. In fact, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, during his visit, has said that the U.S. continues to be interested in deterrence in East Asia. So those are things that Taiwan can work on. Taiwan has shown itself to be a good partner in the past. It can potentially do that, continue to do that.
Next week, Xi Jinping will visit Malaysia, Cambodia, and Vietnam, 3 nations which had very high U.S. tariffs applied on them before the pause. So what implications could this visit bring about?
I think these states were beneficiaries of the China plus one strategies, and hence their high surplus, and probably with the United States, hence the tariffs. At the same time, these 3 Southeast Asian states are ones that have been trying to cultivate closer relations with the PRC at any rate. So I suppose looking at the trade war with the United States, General Secretary Xi Jinping probably thinks that he can perhaps find inroads for cooperation with these two states. Now, things are also complicated, and probably Xi will have to work through them. One, because these two states, the way that their economies work is that they will sometimes produce components that get shipped to China for final assembly, or vice versa. But one of the major final markets is the United States. If the U.S. is closed off to the PRC, we could see a diversion of trade through these countries toward the U.S., and the question will be whether Washington wants to then shut off those channels as well. At the same time, these three countries, they being in close economic having close economic ties with the PRC means to say that they also take quite a lot of PRC exports, and there have been concerns about overcapacity in the past. This pressure is likely to increase as the U.S. market is essentially shut off to PRC goods, and that the diversion of trade to these countries from the PRC could put a lot of pressure on these economies, especially small and medium-sized enterprises.
That was Jade Chong, a political scientist at the National University of Singapore. All good things come to an end. A special Southeast Asian bookstore in New Taipei is closing after a decade. But as Tiffany Wong reports, the community hopes its legacy will live on.
Closing a chapter on this beloved bookstore. Brilliant Time, a Southeast Asian-themed bookstore in New Taipei, is shutting down after 10 years. The space has been a hub for people from Southeast Asian countries living in Taiwan, looking for stories of their homelands. And now the owners say their mission is complete.
但这10年来，慢慢台湾各地的图书馆也开始有东南亚的书了。就政府用政府的 budget 来买书，然后给在台湾的外籍劳工、外籍配偶看。所以我觉得我们的阶段性任务基本上完成了。
The husband and wife team of Zhang Zheng and Yun Zhang Liao have run the store as a space for visitors to gather on the weekends and borrow books, listen to lectures, or just meet with friends.
我觉得我最想念的应该就是那种不期而遇的客人，就是其实有时候我们来店里也不知道会遇到谁，但就推门而入就会遇到一些很神奇的朋友。
Although the bookstore catered to Southeast Asian readers, they also had frequent local visitors, people wanting to learn more about Taiwan's growing multicultural society. There are around 800,000 migrant workers in Taiwan, nearly all from Southeast Asia, and about 500,000 so-called new immigrants, or foreign spouses of Taiwanese citizens, many of whom face barriers and prejudice in local society.
灿烂时光真的，我感觉这边真的会让来自不同地方的人，就是会 stick together， 然后这种 intertwine 的这种氛围，是我在其他书店好像比较没有那么多。我会说，就是还是会有一些，可是这种氛围是我一直觉得这边有一个魔力。就那一场的读书会，虽然只是短短2个小时，但我觉得那个 journey 是很丰富的。
The bookstore's rich history is painted on the walls, with postcards and signatures from visitors, and gifts from people whose lives were touched by the stories and memories made here.
For the past 10 years, the bookstore owners have been keeping track of books using handwritten logs like these, covered with names in Thai, Vietnamese, Indonesian, English, and Chinese. With no limit to how long they can rent the books, sometimes it's hard to keep track. But for the owners, the real value isn't the books themselves, it's the knowledge inside that's priceless.
And while one chapter closes for the bookstore, its story continues at a major transit hub in Taipei. This is where many Indonesian migrant workers spend their days off. And here, the books come to the readers.
现在南势角的书店虽然要结束，不过这边会持续办下去。那就是不管是我来，我太太来，或者我们有志工，就大家轮流维持这个小空间。那你看这边可能有1000个印尼朋友吧，至少有1-2个爱看书。
In no time, readers are clamoring over their wares.
我喜欢 businessman。
你未来想要当 businessman？
对，我喜欢了。
我 like 那个 history book, story book, and comic.
As they turn the page on this chapter of their lives, the owners hope the brilliant times made at their shop will continue in the stories of readers and their lives in Taiwan. James Lin, Kamashi, and Tiffany Wong in New Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A historic town in southern Taiwan is remembering the man who saved its cultural treasures almost a year after his death. What started as a one-person campaign has become a movement that's echoed through the region. John Van Tres has this report.
The lotus blossoms are back as southern Taiwan's gentle winter gives way to the warmth of spring. They've been blooming in this same pond year after year for more than a century. Here at the old Yang family residence in Jiadong, Pingdong County, not much has changed since the 1920s. The feng shui pond still runs with water, intricate stone carvings still adorn the walls, and the complex decorations on the roof, from flowers to elephant heads, show no signs of weathering. It's all lovingly preserved for tour groups to enjoy. But were it not for one man, these fine views would all have fallen into ruin years ago. Zheng Guihai was a doctor, but it's his poetry and his defense of local culture that people best remember him for. It started with a Yang family residence. In 1995, plans to build a road through part of the grounds stirred local resistance. But the protests failed to achieve much. That's when Zheng Guihai stepped in, and what he did set off a chain reaction. Jiadong is one of the towns in this part of southern Taiwan with a big population of Hakka people. These are people with Chinese origins, but with their own distinct language, history, and way of life. Zheng turned saving this one home, the Yang family residence, into a Hakka cause. Groups from out of town joined in. At first, the protests were something of a confusing novelty in this small town.
我记得很多妇女就是老人家就依着那个门边，也好奇到底发生什么事情，因为整个嘉东村大概没有这样办过。
But the pressure campaign worked. The planned road was rerouted, and the building and grounds are still here. More than that, people began to appreciate a local heritage they'd come to overlook. So when the next battle to save an old building came in 2011, people were primed to take action. After 100 years, the two-story shop and home that local people call Zhang's house was collapsing. And with the property being used as bank collateral, repairs were impossible. With a vigorous fundraising campaign, though, Zheng was able to change the right minds. Today, the building looks freshly restored. At the time, Zheng spoke to Taiwan's Hakka TV about his thinking. Zheng Guihai died on the 6th of August, 2024. But he left behind not just verse like this, but a town he'd taught to take pride in itself as a living museum. Others have now taken up the baton. Now, within 1 kilometer, visitors can find 5 carefully protected historic sites. And nearby, an old streetscape has been turned into a cultural space named Poet's Walk in Zheng's honor. In Zhang's house, the building he campaigned for, a small exhibit on Zheng's life runs till June, a reminder of a person who changed his community. Ethan Pan and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching. Here's what happened. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these images of The Herds, a unique puppet show in Africa highlighting the impact of climate change. I'm Jaime Ocon. Take care, and we'll see you next time.